The war room aboard the massive command ship Horizon's Edge felt cold, despite the dozens of alien bodies packed inside. Captain Jake Morrison sat at the far end of the long metal table, watching General Vextar spread holographic battle plans across the surface with his clawed hands. The reptilian commander's mercury-colored scales caught the light from the projectors, making him look like a living statue carved from precious metal. Jake had been in many war rooms during his 15 years of service, but none quite like this. 1. Around the table sat representatives from over 30 different alien species, each one more desperate than the last. Admiral Korath of the Crystalline Axiom Empire tapped his fingers against the table, creating small musical notes. Commander Yathara from the gaseous nebula worlds floated in a containment suit that sparkled with her natural bioluminescence. The others were equally strange and wonderful, but all shared the same expression of barely controlled fear. The reason for their fear hung in the holographic display above the table. Red markers showed the advance of the Krillian swarm across 17 star systems. Each red dot represented billions of dead civilians and entire worlds consumed by the bioships that made up the enemy fleet. In just 3 months, the Krillians had eaten their way through more territory than most wars consumed in decades. "The situation is critical," General Vextar said, his voice carrying the weight of command through his universal translator. "Our combined fleets have failed to stop the swarm. Every weapon we use against them they adapt to within days. Every tactic we try they counter within hours. We are losing this war." Jake watched the other commanders nod in agreement. He had read their reports, studied their battle records, and analyzed their failures. Each species had tried to fight. The Krillians the same way they fought everyone else. Bigger guns, thicker armor, faster ships. It was like trying to stop a flood with sandbags when what you really needed was to redirect the river. "Our intelligence estimates show that we have perhaps 2 weeks before the swarm reaches the core worlds," Vextar continued. "If we are going to act, it must be now." The general activated a new display that showed their remaining forces. Even combined, the fleet looked small compared to the growing mass of Krillian bioships. Jake counted the ships in his head and came up with the same numbers his Earth computer had calculated days ago. They were outnumbered 5-1, and that was assuming every ship in the coalition fleet was ready for battle. "I propose a final assault on the Krillian home cluster," Vextar said. The hologram shifted to show a detailed map of Krillian space. "We gather everything we have and strike at their source. If we can destroy the queen mind that controls the swarm, perhaps the bioships will become confused and turn on each other." Admiral Korath's crystalline body chimed softly. "The cost will be enormous. We estimate 60% casualties in the diversionary force alone." "Acceptable losses," Commander Yathara said, though her glowing form dimmed as she spoke. "Better to lose 60% fighting than 100% hiding." Jake quietly checked his risk communicator while the alien commanders discussed the details of their suicide mission. The small screen showed a message from Dr. Lisa Parker back on Earth. "Phase 3 complete. Ready for implementation." Allowed himself a small smile and typed back a quick response. "Understood. Stand by." The discussion around the table grew more heated as the commanders realized how desperate their situation had become. Some wanted to evacuate the core worlds and retreat deeper into unexplored space. Others suggested splitting their forces to protect as many civilian populations as possible. A few even mentioned surrendering and hoping the Krillians would show mercy. "The bioships show no mercy," Vextar said firmly. "They consume everything. Surrender means extinction for all our species." Jake studied the faces around the table. These were good people, brave commanders who had led their fleets in dozens of battles, but they were all thinking the same way, using the same strategies that had already failed. They saw the Krillian swarm as a military problem that required a military solution. "General," Jake said quietly, "what if there was another way?" The room fell silent. Vexitar's scales shifted to a darker color, which Jake had learned meant confusion or irritation. "Captain Morrison, your species has contributed bravely to this war, but Earth's fleet consists of only 12 ships. I hardly think this is the time for alternative suggestions." Maybe it is exactly the time, Jake replied. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. With respect, General, everything we've tried so far has failed. Maybe we need to try something different. Different how? Admiral Korath asked, his crystal body ringing with skeptical tones. Jake looked at his communicator again. The countdown he had started 3 months ago was almost at 0. What if instead of fighting their strength, we attacked their weakness? The Krillians have no weaknesses, Commander Yathara said. They adapt to everything. They learn from every battle. They coordinate perfectly across thousands of light years. Exactly, Jake said. They coordinate perfectly. Every bioship follows orders from the Queen Mind without question. Every decision flows through a single source. That's not a strength. That's a vulnerability. General Vextar's scales flushed deep purple, a color Jake had learned meant either deep thought or deep anger. Explain yourself, human. Jake checked his communicator one more time. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. General, he said calmly. You might want to check your long-range sensors. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lieutenant Amy Brooks at the sensor station suddenly straightened in her chair. Her tentacles turned bright orange with excitement as she read her displays. Sir, she called out. I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout Krillian space. The bioships, they're attacking each other. The main holographic display flickered and changed to show real-time sensor feeds from across the galaxy. In system after system, Krillian bioships that had moved in perfect formation for millions of years were now firing on their own kind. Hive clusters that had functioned as single organisms were tearing themselves apart from the inside. General Vextar stared at the display in shock. His scales cycled through several colors before settling on a deep blue that Jake didn't recognize. Human, he said slowly. Explain this, now. Jake walked to the center of the room, all eyes following him. 3 months ago, when the Krillians first attacked our worlds, our scientists made an interesting discovery. While you were all building bigger weapons, we studied the enemy. We learned how they think, how they communicate, and most importantly, how they make decisions. He gestured to the chaotic scenes playing out on the display. What you're seeing is the result of a project we called Operation Harmony. We didn't attack their ships or their weapons. We attacked their ability to agree with each other. The silence in the war room was deafening. Every alien commander stared at the holographic display, watching the impossible unfold before their eyes. Krillian bioships that had moved as one mind for millions of years were now locked in brutal combat with their own kind. The perfectly coordinated swarm was destroying itself. General Vextar's claws scraped against the metal table as he leaned forward. Human, I demand an explanation. How is this possible? Jake moved to the display controls, his fingers dancing, over the human interface that had been added to accommodate Earth's small contribution to the coalition. Lieutenant Brooks, can you give us a detailed view of the Vega system? Amy Brooks, her orange tentacles still bright with excitement, adjusted her sensors. The main display zoomed in to show a sector that had been completely overrun by Krillian forces just days ago. Now bioships shaped like massive sea creatures were tearing each other apart with weapons that had once been used to consume planets. Dr. Lisa Parker back on Earth discovered something that your intelligence services missed, Jake began. The Krillian communication network isn't purely biological. It has quantum components that allow instant communication across vast distances. Admiral Korath's crystalline body chimed with confusion. We knew this. Their coordination speed is what made them so dangerous. True, Jake said. But what you didn't know is that their quantum network operates on principles similar to our old internet systems. It has protocols, data packets, and routing systems. It's biological, but it's still essentially a computer network. He pulled up a file from his personal data storage. The display showed complex diagrams of neural pathways and quantum field equations that made most of the alien commander's eyes glaze over. Dr. Parker spent weeks studying captured Krillian biomatter. She discovered that their hive mind works by sending constant updates from the Queen Mind to every ship in the swarm. Orders, tactical data, even basic behavioral instructions. Commander Yathara floated closer to the display. This is fascinating, but how does it explain what we're seeing? Because we introduced something into their network that it was never designed to handle, Jake said with a smile. We gave them a choice. The room erupted in confused voices. General Vextar slammed his clawed hand on the table, demanding silence. Explain this choice, human. Jake activated another file. This one showed a complex program that looked like a combination of computer virus and biological organism. We call it the Harmony virus. It doesn't destroy their communication network, it improves it. The virus spreads through their quantum channels and creates multiple command structures within the same network. Multiple command structures? Admiral Korath asked. Every infected bioship starts receiving orders from different queen minds. All the orders seem equally valid, equally important. The ships that have been following a single voice for millions of years suddenly hear dozens of voices, all claiming to be the true authority. Lieutenant Brooks pulled up tactical data from the affected systems. Sir, I'm tracking over 300 separate Krillian factions now. They're fighting over territory, resources, even philosophical differences about how to run the swarm. Jake nodded. The beauty of the virus is that it learns from the Krillian network itself. Every time a bioship tries to assert dominance over another ship, the virus creates a new authority figure to challenge it. The more they try to establish control, the more chaos they create. General Vextar stared at the display showing Krillian civil war spreading across multiple star systems. But how did you deliver this virus? Their bioships are impossible to infiltrate. That's where Captain Steve Martinez and his team came in, Jake said. He pulled up personnel files showing a group of humans in military uniforms. 2 months ago, while you were all planning defensive strategies, the Silent Runner carried out a covert mission deep in Krillian space. The display changed to show records from the stealth mission. Jake watched the alien commanders study the data with growing amazement. Steve Martinez had led a team of 12 volunteers on what everyone expected to be a suicide mission. Their job was to capture a living Krillian bioship without alerting the swarm. They used our cloaking technology and careful timing to isolate a scout ship near the Centauri system, Jake explained. Tech specialist Kate Johnson figured out how to keep the bioship alive while Dr. Parker studied its neural pathways. You captured a living Krillian ship? Commander Yathara's glow brightened with what Jake had learned was excitement. That should have triggered an immediate response from the entire swarm. It would have if we had hurt it, Jake said. But we didn't hurt it. We healed it. Kate Johnson identified several minor system failures in the captured bioship and fixed them. As far as the swarm knew, their scout was just getting routine maintenance. Admiral Korath's crystal body rang with disbelief. You performed maintenance on an enemy vessel? Dr. Parker's biological analysis showed that Krillian bioships are constantly sending status reports back to the Hive network. If we had damaged our captured ship, every bioship in the galaxy would have known about it within hours. But if we improved its performance, the network would classify our modifications as positive adaptations. Jake brought up the technical specifications that Dr. Parker's team had discovered. The Krillian bioships were living creatures, but they were also sophisticated machines. They had immune systems, digestive systems, and nervous systems that all worked together to process information and carry out orders. Programmer Danny Kim realized that we could modify the ship's communication systems without triggering any defensive responses. To the bioship, our virus looked like a software update from the Queen Mind itself. And when you released the ship, General Vextar asked, it went home and shared the update with the rest of the swarm, just like it was programmed to do. Jake smiled. Within days, every bioship in Krillian space had downloaded what they thought was an improvement to their communication protocols. Lieutenant Brooks called out from her station. Sir, I'm getting reports from the Outer Rim. Krillian factions are requesting communication with coalition forces. Some want to negotiate territorial agreements. The war room fell silent again as the implications sank in. The unstoppable Krillian swarm wasn't just fighting itself. Some factions were actually trying to make peace with their former enemies. They're learning to think as individuals, Jake explained. For the first time in their species' history, Krillian bioships are making their own decisions instead of following orders from above. Some choose to fight, Some choose to explore, some choose to negotiate. The hive mind is becoming a democracy, whether they want it or not. General Vextar's scales had shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, a mixture of gold and silver that might have indicated respect. How long have you been planning this operation? Since the first Krillian attack 3 months ago, Jake admitted. While the Coalition was mobilizing fleets, Earth was mobilizing scientists. We studied every piece of data we could find about Krillian behavior, biology, and psychology. Psychology? Commander Yathara asked. Dr. Parker brought in experts from every field she could think of. Biologists, computer programmers, historians who studied civil wars, even philosophers who understood how societies change. We approached the Krillian problem like a puzzle instead of a battle. Admiral Korath studied the continuing chaos in Krillian space. And now? Jake looked at the tactical display showing former Krillian territory fragmenting into dozens of smaller regions. Now we wait and see what kind of neighbors they become. Some factions will probably remain hostile, but others are already showing signs of curiosity about the galaxy beyond their borders. For the first time in galactic history, the Krillians might actually join the community of civilized species. General Vextar stood slowly, his tall form casting shadows across the holographic display. Captain Morrison, I believe I owe you an apology. And perhaps the galaxy owes your species a debt of gratitude. Jake shook his head. We just did what humans do best, General. We looked at an impossible problem and found a different way to solve it. 2 months earlier, Captain Steve Martinez stood on the bridge of the Silent Runner, watching the stars shift from blue to red as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The stealth vessel was humanity's most advanced ship, equipped with experimental cloaking technology that made it nearly invisible to most sensors. Nearly invisible wasn't good enough for their mission today. We're at the edge of Krillian space, reported Lieutenant Kate Johnson from her position at the sensor station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, fine-tuning their passive scanners to detect bioship movements without revealing their own position. I'm picking up patrol patterns approximately 50,000 kilometers from here. Steve studied the tactical display showing the positions of Krillian scout ships. Each one was a living creature the size of a small moon, capable of consuming entire planets and adapting to any weapon fired at it. His mission was to capture one of these monsters without alerting the rest of the swarm to their presence. Remember, he said to his crew of 12 volunteers, we're not here to fight, we're here to borrow. Sergeant Ben Adams checked his equipment one more time. The infiltration specialist had volunteered for the mission despite knowing that their chances of returning to Earth were slim. The bioship we're targeting should be making its routine patrol sweep in about 6 hours. That gives us time to prepare the capture system. Kate pulled up the detailed scans they had been studying for weeks. Dr. Lisa Parker had identified several types of Krillian bioships, each designed for different functions within the swarm. Scouts were smaller and faster than the main combat ships, but they were still massive by human standards and packed with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The key is timing, Steve said, reviewing their plan one more time. We wait until the scout is at the farthest point of its patrol route away from backup. Kate, you'll handle the technical infiltration. Ben, your team manages the physical capture. Everyone else focuses on keeping us invisible. The next 6 hours passed slowly. The crew of the Silent Runner watched Krillian patrol ships move through their territory with the precise coordination that made them so dangerous. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship was positioned. Every movement was calculated and purposeful. Target acquired, Kate announced as a bioship appeared on their sensors. The Scout was shaped like a massive jellyfish, its translucent, body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and navigation system. Tentacles the size of skyscrapers trailed behind it, each one armed with organic weapons that could punch through the hull of any Coalition warship. Steve gave the order to begin their approach. The Silent Runner moved slowly, using minimal power, to avoid detection. Their cloaking system bent light around the ship, making it effectively invisible to visual sensors. More importantly, it also masked their thermal and electromagnetic signatures. Remember the plan, Steve whispered into his communication system. "We're not attacking this thing. We're helping it." Dr. Parker's research had revealed something remarkable about Krillian bioships. Despite their fearsome appearance, they were actually quite fragile creatures that required constant maintenance to function properly. Living in the vacuum of space put enormous stress on their biological systems, and they frequently developed minor problems that affected their performance. Kate had spent weeks studying captured biomatter samples, learning how to identify and repair these common problems. Her job was to make their target bioship healthier, not hurt it. If they succeeded, the scout would return to the swarm carrying what it thought was a beneficial adaptation. "We're in position," Ben reported from the shuttle bay. His team was preparing to launch in micropods, tiny vessels designed to look like space debris. Each pod carried specialized equipment for attaching to the bioship's hull without triggering its immune responses. "Beginning approach," Steve said. The silent runner moved closer to the patrol scout, which continued its routine sweep without showing any sign of alarm. Their cloaking technology was working perfectly. "I'm reading biological stress in the target's propulsion system," Kate announced. "There's a blockage in its main digestive tract that's reducing efficiency by about 12%. Perfect target for our cover story." Ben and his team launched their micropods, each one following a carefully calculated trajectory that would bring them into contact with different parts of the bioship's hull. To any observer, the pods would look like small asteroids or debris naturally attracted to the scout's gravitational field. "First pod attached," Ben reported. "Beginning medical procedures." What they were doing was essentially surgery on a living starship. Kate guided Ben's team through the process of identifying the blockage in the bioship's digestive system and carefully removing it without causing damage. At the same time, they were installing tiny devices that looked like beneficial bacteria but actually contained the Harmony virus. "The virus needs to integrate with the bioship's nervous system," Kate explained as she monitored the installation process. "It has to look like a natural adaptation, something the scout's immune system will accept and even protect." Steve watched the operation through remote cameras attached to Ben's equipment. The inside of the Krillian bioship was like nothing he had ever seen. Organic corridors pulsed with flowing nutrients, walls breathed with the creature's respiratory cycle, and bioluminescent displays showed information in patterns that human eyes could barely comprehend. "Integration successful," Ben reported after 3 hours of delicate work. "The virus is spreading through the neural pathways. It's already starting to modify the communication protocols." "Any sign of immune response?" Kate asked. "None. The bioship is actually producing antibodies to protect our modifications. It thinks we're helping it evolve." That was exactly what they had hoped for. Dr. Parker's research had shown that Krillian bioships were constantly adapting and improving themselves. Any change that increased performance would be accepted and shared with the rest of the swarm through their quantum communication network. "Biological repairs complete," Ben announced. "The blockage has been removed and the propulsion system is now operating at full efficiency. Our patient should be feeling much better." Kate monitored the bioship's vital signs through their passive sensors. "Confirmed. All biological systems are showing improved performance. The scout is now faster, more efficient, and better adapted to space travel than it was before we arrived." Steve smiled grimly. "And it's carrying our gift back to its friends." The team carefully removed all traces of their presence from the bioship. Their tools were designed to dissolve after completing their work, leaving no evidence that humans had ever been there. To the Krillian scout, the improvements would seem like natural evolutionary adaptations. "All teams back aboard," Ben reported, as the last micropod docked with the silent runner. "Mission accomplished." Steve watched the bioship resume its patrol route. The massive creature moved with noticeably improved grace and speed, its biological systems operating more efficiently than ever before. Within hours, it would return to the swarm and share its new adaptations through the hive mind's communication network. "Kate, how long before the virus spreads through the entire swarm?" Steve asked. Kate studied her calculations. Based on their communication patterns, every bioship in Krillian space should receive the update within 72 hours. The virus won't activate until it's completely integrated into their systems, which should take another week. And then they'll discover what it's like to have multiple opinions about everything. Steve ordered the silent runner to retreat to a safe distance. They would monitor the results of their mission from outside Krillian space, documenting the effects of the Harmony virus as it spread through the enemy fleet. 3 weeks later, they watched the first signs of chaos begin to appear in Krillian territory. Bioships that had moved in perfect formation for millions of years started to hesitate, to question orders, to make independent decisions. The hive mind that had terrified the galaxy was learning to argue with itself. Dr. Parker was right, Kate said as they watched Krillian scouts break formation and head in different directions. Give them the ability to think for themselves and they'll find plenty to disagree about. Steve nodded, knowing that their small crew had just changed the course of galactic history. Let's go home, he said. Jake and the Coalition are going to want to hear about this. The silent runner engaged its faster-than-light drive and headed back toward Coalition space, leaving behind a Krillian swarm that would never be the same again. Back in the present, the Coalition war room had transformed from a place of despair into something resembling controlled chaos. Officers from dozens of species clustered around sensor stations, watching in amazement as the Krillian swarm continued to tear itself apart across multiple star systems. What had been an unstoppable force just hours ago was now a collection of competing factions, each convinced that they alone understood the true will of their species. General Vextar stood before the main holographic display, his mercury scales shifting through colors that Jake had learned indicated deep concentration. "Show me the cascade pattern," he ordered Lieutenant Brooks. Amy Brooks manipulated her controls, and the display changed to show a time-lapse view of the past 3 weeks. Jake watched the alien commanders lean forward as they saw how the Harmony virus had spread through the Krillian network like ripples in a pond. It started with individual scouts, Jake explained, pointing to small red dots that appeared and disappeared across the map. Each infected bioship returned to its hive cluster and shared what it thought were beneficial adaptations. The virus was designed to look like an improvement to their communication systems. But it was actually a weapon, Admiral Korath observed, his crystalline body chiming with what Jake had learned was admiration. Not a weapon, Jake corrected. A choice. The virus didn't destroy anything. It just gave the Krillians something they had never experienced before, the ability to disagree. With authority, Commander Yathara floated closer to the display, her bioluminescent form pulsing with curiosity. How does it work exactly? Jake activated a detailed view of a single Krillian hive cluster. The display showed hundreds of bioships that had once moved in perfect unison, now breaking into smaller groups. Every bioship in the cluster is still receiving orders from their queen mind. But they're also receiving orders from what appear to be other queen minds, all equally valid and equally insistent. Other queen minds? General Vextar asked. The virus creates them, Jake explained. Whenever a bioship tries to assert dominance over another ship, or whenever there's any kind of hierarchical command, the virus generates a competing authority figure. It uses the Krillians' own communication protocols to make these new voices sound completely authentic. Lieutenant Brooks pulled up real-time communication intercepts from the affected areas. The war room filled with the strange harmonics of Krillian language, translated into galactic standard by their computers. Hive Singer commands, "Pursue the crystal ships to the 4th moon," came one voice. Queen Mother demands, "Return immediately." To defend the home cluster, came another. Elder Mind insists, "Divide the fleet and secure both objectives," came a third. Jake smiled as he watched the confusion spread across the alien faces around the table. Every bioship is receiving dozens of contradictory orders, all from sources that seem equally legitimate. They're trying to follow all of them at once. Which creates chaos, Admiral Korath concluded. Which creates democracy, Jake corrected. Again. The bioships are learning to make their own decisions for the first time in millions of years. Some are choosing to fight, some are choosing to explore, some are even choosing to surrender. The display shifted to show a remarkable scene in the Vega system. A group of Krillian bioships had actually approached a coalition patrol fleet with what appeared to be a surrender offer. The massive creatures hung motionless in space, their weapon systems powered down, broadcasting a message that roughly translated to, "We wish to discuss terms." "This is unprecedented," Commander Yathara said, her glow brightening with excitement. "Krillians have never surrendered before. They don't even have words for concepts like negotiation or compromise." "They do now," Jake said. "The virus doesn't just create competing authorities. It also introduces new concepts into their communication network. Ideas like individual rights, democratic decision-making, and peaceful conflict resolution." General Vextar studied the surrender, seen with obvious amazement. "Where did these concepts come from?" "Dr. Parker's team included experts from every field we could think of," Jake explained. "Historians, philosophers, political scientists, even anthropologists who studied how human societies developed democratic institutions. The virus carries compressed information about thousands of years of human social evolution." "You gave them our history?" Admiral Korath asked. "We gave them alternatives to the hive mind," Jake clarified. "Ways of organizing society that don't depend on blind obedience to a single authority. The Krillians are essentially experiencing their own version of the Enlightenment, compressed into a few weeks instead of centuries." Lieutenant Brooks called out from her station. "Sir, I'm tracking over 800 distinct Krillian factions now. Some are still hostile, but others are broadcasting what our computers are translating as philosophical debates." Jake pulled up the communication logs. The translations were rough, but the meaning was clear. Krillian bioships were arguing about concepts that their species had never considered before. Should they continue consuming worlds or try to find sustainable ways to gather resources? Was the old hive mind system really the best way to organize their society? Did individual bioships have rights that couldn't be overruled by higher authorities? "They're asking questions they've never asked before," Jake said. "And because they're no longer limited to a single perspective, they're finding multiple answers to every question." The display showed another remarkable development. In the Centauri system, two groups of Krillian bioships had stopped fighting each other and were instead working together to repair damage caused by their own civil war. They were using their bio-terraforming abilities not to consume planets, but to heal worlds they had previously damaged. This group calls itself the Harmony Singers, Lieutenant Brooks reported. They're broadcasting messages about restoration and peaceful coexistence. Another faction, the Unity Seekers, is asking for permission to study coalition technology in exchange for sharing their biological sciences. General Vextar's scales had settled into a golden color that Jake recognized as wonder. "In one day you have accomplished what our combined fleets could not achieve in months of warfare. The Krillian threat is neutralized." "Not neutralized," Jake corrected. "Transformed. Some factions are still dangerous and will need to be dealt with through conventional means, but others are becoming potential allies instead of enemies." He pulled up the long-range projections that Dr. Parker's team had calculated. "Our computer models suggest that within 6 months, the former Krillian swarm will have fragmented into several hundred independent groups. Most will be too small to threaten anyone. Some will join the galactic community as peaceful traders or researchers. A few might even become valuable allies." Commander Yathara floated thoughtfully near the display. "You've essentially given birth to a new civilization, or perhaps hundreds of new civilizations." "That was the idea," Jake admitted. Dr. Parker realized that the Krillians weren't inherently evil. They were just trapped in a social system that didn't allow for individual thought or moral choice. Give them the ability to think for themselves, and most of them choose to be better than their programming. Admiral Korath's crystal body rang with complex harmonics. "What you've done is remarkable, but it's also dangerous. You've unleashed forces that can't be controlled or predicted." Jake nodded seriously. "Every act of liberation is dangerous. When humans first developed democratic governments, it led to centuries of wars and revolutions, but it also led to unprecedented prosperity, creativity, and moral progress. The Krillians are just beginning their own version of that journey." General Vextar studied the continuing chaos in former Krillian space. "And what of the factions that choose violence? We deal with them the same way we've always dealt with aggressive neighbors, Jake said, through a combination of defense, diplomacy, and demonstration that cooperation works better than conquest. The difference is that now we're not facing a monolithic enemy. We're dealing with individual groups that can be reasoned with, negotiated with, and if necessary, defeated without destroying their entire species. The war room had grown quiet as the implications sank in. The galaxy's greatest threat had been transformed from an extinction-level enemy into a complex political situation. It would require diplomacy instead of warfare, understanding instead of firepower. The real work starts now, Jake said, looking around at the assembled commanders. We need to figure out how to help the peaceful Krillian factions while defending ourselves from the hostile ones. We need to establish communication protocols, trade agreements, and probably a few defense treaties. General Vextar's scales shifted to a deep blue that Jake had never seen before. Captain Morrison, I believe the Coalition owes your species more than gratitude. We owe you a complete reconsideration of how we approach conflict resolution. Jake smiled. Just remember, General, sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure nobody needs to fight it. 6 months later, the galaxy looked completely different. Jake Morrison stood at the large window in his new office aboard the Coalition command station, watching ships from dozens of worlds dock at the massive spaceport. Half a year ago, this same view would have been filled with warships preparing for what everyone thought would be the final battle against the Krillian swarm. Now, he watched merchant vessels, research ships, and even former Krillian bioships working together in peaceful trade. A soft chime announced a visitor. General Vextar entered, his mercury-colored scales now showing flecks of gold that Jake had learned meant contentment among his people. The tall reptilian commander carried a datapad and wore an expression that Jake recognized as good news. The reports are in from all 17 systems, Vextar said, settling into the specially designed chair across from Jake's desk. The restoration project is ahead of schedule. The Krillian bioterraforming technology is working better than our scientists predicted. Jake nodded, pulling up the holographic display that showed the recovered star systems. Green indicators marked successful. Atmospheric restoration on 12 worlds. Yellow showed ongoing work on 4 more. Only one system still glowed red, but even that was expected to turn yellow within the week. Dr. Parker's team did excellent work, Jake said. Getting the peaceful Krillian factions to share their terraforming knowledge was the key. Those bioships can repair damaged atmospheres in months instead of decades. Vexitar's scaled head tilted in what Jake recognized as curiosity. I still find it hard to understand how your species saw this possibility. When we looked at the Krillians, we saw only enemies to be destroyed. You saw potential allies hiding beneath their programming. Through the window, Jake watched a bioship shaped like a giant flower slowly dock with the station. Its organic hull pulsed with gentle bioluminescent patterns that Dr. Parker had identified as the Krillian equivalent of a friendly greeting. The ship's captain was Zarthik, a former Krillian warrior, who now led one of the largest independent trading groups in the galaxy. We had an advantage, Jake explained. Earth's history is full of civil wars and divided nations that eventually learned to work together. We understood that enemies can become friends if you change the circumstances that made them enemies in the first place. The door chimed again. Dr. Lisa Parker entered, her lab coat replaced by the blue uniform of the Interspecies Research Initiative. She looked tired but happy, carrying a cup of coffee and a smile that reached her eyes. Jake Vextar, perfect timing, she said, setting down her coffee and activating her own datapad. I just finished the analysis of the Krillian communication networks. The Harmony virus has completely integrated into their systems. They're not just fragmented anymore. They're actually evolving into something new. The holographic display changed to show a complex web of connections across former Krillian space. Instead of the rigid hierarchy that had once controlled the swarm, Jake saw a network that looked almost organic, flexible, adaptive, with multiple centers of decision-making. What are we looking at? Vextar asked. Democracy, Lisa said with a grin. Or at least their version of it. The different Krillian factions are learning to negotiate, to compromise, to make decisions collectively instead of following orders from a single queen mind. Some groups are even experimenting with individual thought, something their species hasn't experienced in millions of years. Jake studied the patterns on the display. How are they handling it? Better than we expected. Danny Kim's latest analysis shows that most factions are actually happier this way. They're more creative, more flexible in their thinking. Some are developing art, music, even philosophy. The warrior caste that used to only know how to fight is learning to build and explore. Instead, a communication alert sounded. Jake accepted the incoming message, and a hologram of Captain Steve Martinez appeared above the desk. The veteran officer was aboard the Silent Runner, now serving as a diplomatic vessel instead of a stealth ship. Jake, reporting from the Andromeda. "Border," Steve said. "The hegemony forces have agreed to meet with our negotiation team. They were pretty surprised when we offered to solve their resource conflicts instead of just telling them to stop fighting." "Any problems with the approach?" Jake asked. "None so far." Kate Johnson's cultural analysis was spot on. The hegemony species think in terms of honor and territory, so we frame the solution as a way for all sides to gain honor instead of lose it. Ben Adams is setting up the neutral meeting ground now. Vextar leaned forward. "Another potential. War prevented before it starts. Your strategic analysis division has stopped 6 conflicts in the past 4 months. The old coalition would have sent battle fleets to all of them." Jake nodded to Steve's hologram. "Keep me updated on the hegemony situation, and tell Kate I said good work on the cultural profiles." "Will do." Martinez out. As the hologram faded, Lisa pulled up another display. "Speaking of cultural analysis, I wanted to show you something interesting. The peaceful Krillian factions have started requesting human advisors, not for military purposes, for social development. They want to learn how to handle disagreement without violence." The display showed several bioships with human crew members, working alongside former Krillian warriors. In one image, Jake could see Lieutenant Sam Brooks teaching a group of Krillians how to use voting systems. In another, Ryan Torres was helping them understand the concept of individual rights. "They're adapting faster than any of us predicted," Lisa continued. "Some factions have already established what they call consensus pods, small groups that make decisions together and then coordinate with other pods. It's like watching a whole species learn to think differently." Vexitar stood and walked to the window. "The galaxy has changed, Jake. 6 months ago we measured strength by the size of our fleets and the power of our weapons. Now species are asking to join the coalition not for protection, but for access to human strategic thinking and diplomatic solutions." Jake joined the general at the window. Below them, the spaceport buzzed with activity. A massive cargo ship from the Axiom Empire was unloading crystal technology next to a bioship full of Krillian terraforming equipment. Nearby, a sleek vessel from the Nebula worlds was taking on human diplomatic advisors bound for a trade dispute in the Outer Rim. "The best part," Jake said, "is that we're not just preventing wars. We're helping species understand each other in ways they never could before. The Axioms are sharing their crystal technology to help the Nebula worlds build better cities. The Krillians are using their bioships to restore worlds damaged by old conflicts. Even former enemies are finding reasons to work together." Lisa checked her datapad and smiled. "Speaking of working together, I just got confirmation from the restoration project in the Vega system. The Krillian bioships finished repairing the atmosphere 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The refugee families are already moving back to their homeworld." A soft alert sounded from Jake's desk. He walked over and saw a priority message from Earth. The transmission was from Admiral Patricia Hayes, head of Earth's Strategic Command. "Jake, congratulations on the promotion to Director of Interspecies Strategic Analysis. The Earth Council is proud of what you and your team have accomplished. We're sending additional personnel and resources to support your expansion. The galaxy is finally at peace, and humanity played a key role in making that happen." Vextar's scales showed deep satisfaction. "Director Morrison has a nice sound to it, though I suspect you'll be too busy solving the galaxy's problems to enjoy the title." Jake looked at the star charts showing former conflict zones now marked in green for peaceful resolution. Each one represented thousands of lives saved, worlds preserved, and species learning to understand each other instead of fighting. The funny thing is, Jake said, we never set out to change the galaxy. We just wanted to stop one war. But it turns out that understanding your enemies well enough to defeat them is the same skill you need to turn them into friends. Lisa raised her coffee cup in a mock toast to winning wars by ending the need for them. Jake smiled, watching former Krillian bioships work alongside coalition vessels in the spaceport below. The galaxy was indeed different now, not because humanity had conquered it, but because they had helped it learn to conquer itself.